Hello, world. Welcome, welcome. I'm Linden Tibbetts, founder and CEO of IFT. Welcome to this special 10-year anniversary. Ask Me Anything. Looking forward to answering everybody's questions. Really pretty special week for me and our team. 10 years ago this week, we launched IFT into private beta. And it was, kind of a culmination of a couple years of work before we launched. And it's just been the most incredible journey over the last 10 plus years. There's been ups, downs. We've tried things that have worked really well, tried things that haven't. We've learned a whole lot along the way. And just incredibly thankful for everybody who stuck with us over the years, the folks that are just signing up, getting started, creating their first applets, upgrading to Pro, or building a service on the platform. Or anybody else that's ever been involved or consulted, advised, or worked here with the team at IFT, thank you. It's just been one hell of a ride, and I can't wait for what comes next. Still just as passionate as ever about what we're doing, and I kind of pinch myself more than once a week at the just how lucky I am to be able to work on something that I love. So thank you all. With that, before we jump in and start answering some questions, a couple of things that, around the 10-year anniversary, we're running a special promotion. Our annual plan, which just launched about a month ago for Pro, is now discounted almost 30% to $34.99. If you sign up now, get your first year at a nice discount. We'll be running additional promotions over the course of the next year and probably for the foreseeable future. So really, really excited for the nearly 200,000 users that have upgraded so far, and can't wait to continue to keep investing there. But to that point, we actually just this week launched some improvements to the activity feed. So when you're looking at applets that are running or perhaps not running the way you'd like them to, adding a bunch of new information there to help people kind of debug or kind of rework how some of their applets are performing on their own. And there's a lot more to come, starting with just some of the basic info that was missing, but really excited to see that out the door, and our team's been working really hard on that. We also have multiple actions support that are the same action. It's a pretty bad bug that we knew about going into the Pro launch. That's something that is just, I think, days away from being released. So very, very excited about that as well. We just have a huge laundry list of things. At the top of that list are things like support for multiple accounts per service, getting just basic trigger, query, and action information on each of the services pages. So we just have a huge list of things. So please keep the feedback and suggestions coming. And finally, I'll mention also around the 10-year anniversary for us, we're running an applet competition. So for those that love to create applets and share what they're building, right now, largely because we don't have a lot of the really rich publishing tools available yet for Pro applets or applets that pros can create, we're asking folks to create a video. And in this case, it's a festive applet theme. So please do that. It could be a Pro applet or an applet using Pro features, or just a regular applet. And I think we're giving away a $500 gift card for the winner on that. So want to make sure I mention that. And Peter, who's listening in, hopefully is smiling to himself. Excited to see the videos that people create. So with that, we'll begin to open up the questions, and I'll try to answer everything. So please fire away, and nothing's off limits, whether it's about new features or even bugs, or even just questions about what we've learned and some of the trials and tribulations we've gone through over the last 10 years. Done a lot of reflecting recently, so all that stuff is top of mind. Happy to talk about it. So first question, let's see. David said you can't join live. Thanks, David. You're maybe not listening now, but would love to get a timeline of some of the upcoming features. So hear you loud and clear. One of the things I'm really pushing our team to do is find a way to take this roadmap and even some of the bugs. We have fixed hundreds of bugs just in the last few weeks, but finding an easy way to make those public so people can at least be aware of what we know about and the progress we're making to fixing that. And we should also be including some of the new features and new things on the roadmap there as well. So that's something that's in progress. We're exploring different ways, whether that's just making our Jira projects a little bit more public or some other tool that allows us to showcase that progress. If anybody has any suggestions, would love to hear them. David, second question from David is talking about working in IT, often understands that plans can be wishful thinking. Is there something other than coming soon? Yes, so that exactly, hopefully the what I just stated in response to your first question answers that second one as well. So Sumit is asking, not able to create a service for sending messages from Telegram to Twitter. So yeah, so that sounds like a bug if you're getting unavailable options in the dropdown. One of the things that we've seen that has worked for a lot of folks that experience similar issues, maybe on Telegram and elsewhere, is to re-authenticate the service. If that still doesn't work, perhaps try creating a different, I'm not sure what Telegram calls them. I'm not a heavy Telegram user, but if it's a channel or a room or something, try creating a new one and seeing if that one shows up. But if not, either ping our community support team. You should hear back. We've done a lot of work to get that response time. We're now under 48 hours. We're closing in on 24 hours, and that quick response for our paying customers is really important for us. So we're getting better there. And go ahead and ask them, and we can dig in a little bit deeper. So Stuart is asking, any target date for webhook replies like Google Home and Google Assistant? I'm not quite sure. You give me some more clarification there, Stuart, on webhook replies. I'm not sure if you're asking about specific actions for Google Assistant or something specific for the webhook service. So would love to know a little bit more about what you'd like to see. Rajamaran.com. Pardon me if I pronounce anybody's name or handle wrong. It's not my strong suit. What's your vision for the next 10 years? That's a good question, and one that I could probably wax poetic for hours about. For us, I think that one of the things that's unique for us, even though we've tried a lot of different things, done some things that work, done some things that haven't, the kind of underlying vision and belief has remained the same. And what that is that the future will only bring more internet services, and not just connected devices. Pretty much every brand or physical object, or really any noun that you can think of will be either directly connected to the internet, associated with the internet, controlled by the internet. And it's not just about having a website. When I say things like home insurance is going to be an internet service, some people say, well, isn't it already? And sure, yeah, maybe you can do some things with a website or an app, but it's not truly connected yet. And so when you think about things, even as kind of mundane as home insurance, pardon me if anybody works in the insurance industry, but it's something that's been around for a long time, and just how far they have to go to really transform into something that's a truly connected service. And then you multiply that across everything you can name. It's almost unfathomable what that world looks like. And it's a world that feels inevitable. And what our mission is and our vision is to make that future in which users and people are only using more internet services more approachable, more flexible, more customizable, something in which users have the confidence that no matter what service they sign up to or what product they buy, that it's going to be compatible with all the other products and all the other services in their lives. And the way that we do that is going to continue to evolve. But that underlying mission and what it is we're going after, I continue to think it's the biggest problem on the internet today, and it's one worth solving with all of our energy. Even if it takes 20 years, it's one of those problems that I think is just so fun, but also so impactful if it can be solved once and for all. So that's the vision. We're going to keep solving that problem, continue on with the mission that we've had for the last 10 years. And yeah, I can talk more about some of the roadmap and some of those actual changes and new additions to do a better job of solving that problem. But it's going to be a lot more of the same, and I don't see that changing for some time. All right, Ryder is asking, hello, why do you get an error when going to platform.if.com? Good question. I don't get that error, but at least I haven't got it in the last 24 hours, last time I checked. But if you want to ping me on Twitter at ltibbets.com, happy to take a look. And if there's a bigger issue there, I might redirect you to our community support team. Stu_C. You've been a member for many years and it's worked perfectly. You then paid, and within 2 days, everything stopped working. You emailed and didn't get a reply, and then you blamed BG for the issue, but it's our fault. It could very well be our fault, Stu_C. I hate to hear that. It's very strange to hear that once you upgraded, everything stopped working. That's not something we've heard either ever or often. But would love to help figure that out. And especially if it's a problem where you hadn't heard back from somebody on the support team, frankly, that's on us. It's really unacceptable that we went a number of weeks there with really, really big delays in responses. And we've since fixed that. We kind of got hands on deck and got down to 0. And we're now holding ourselves to that 40-hour SLA and moving it to 24 here shortly. So would love to learn more, and sorry you had a bad experience, and want to make it right. Rajamran.com, how to pronounce, Rajaimran.com, Imran.com. Again, apologies. Thank you for giving me a couple clues there. Not a question, but your 4-year-old daughter wants to thank IFT and yourself for automations to help her start her day when her parents are still asleep. Oh, so your 4-year-old daughter gets up before you and is already doing something with the internet. Awesome. Thank you. Second question, are you working on integrating NFC RFID with services through IFT? If you are, that'd be great. Honestly, in terms of the new integrations, those are really service-based. So, we really try to avoid integrating directly with any type of protocol or something that isn't necessarily wrapped around some other kind of brand, product, or service. So, I think there's probably lots of other services. I'm not sure how many of those are kind of consumer oriented or end user oriented. I'm sure there's a lot more B2B services around NFC and RFID. But if you can find some and it looks like they should be a part of IFT, please point them in our direction. Let them know that they can get started. Our developer plan is $199 a year. And that's really just to make sure folks are serious, kind of like the Apple developer fee. So people can be on IFT with their brand, product, or service for really next to nothing. And it should be really, really easy to do. It takes a few days to build and a few days to launch. So let them know. Der Metzger, aren't you ashamed of getting paid twice for the service? First from the manufacturers and now again from the consumer. Yes and no. So first off, I'll say we're not really ashamed because we worked really hard to try to differentiate what the different types of customers, end users and the services themselves are paying for. Largely services are paying to do things like publish their own, kind of specially branded applets and bring those applets into their own applications or emails or websites and that don't live on IFT. What users are paying for is the ability to customize and go above and beyond in terms of what types of applets they can create themselves. And it's still free for users to enable as many published applets as they'd like. And many of those published applets are published by the brand. So it's really the brands paying to publish those applets and the users getting them for free. Now, the yes and no part. So the yes part, ashamed, is I don't think we've done a good job of making this clear. And the business and what we're doing with the brands, especially because a lot of what those brands are doing and paying for is happening outside of what the end user sees on IFT. If you go to IFT.com or download the IFT app, you don't necessarily see all the integrations and applets that brands are bringing into their own application. So it's not really clear for users that brands are paying for anything other than the same thing that they are. And we've got to do a better job of that and differentiating that. And next year, back to Rajamaran.com's question, I think a big part of our challenge next year is to really solve that problem. How do we balance the two sides of our business in a way that makes the most sense and hopefully actually reinforces each other, that makes both customers, users, and brands lives better and creates more value for both of those customers. And that's what we're going to get up to next year. There's a lot of things in the works right now in terms of our planning for next year that I can't reveal, but know that I think you're not wrong to point that out, and it's a problem we're looking to rectify. Stuart Rothrock, you've got a custom Google Assistant hot word that generates a webhook with a spoken text to my servers. I would like to send a response from my servers to that webhook that would be spoken by GA. Okay, yeah, this is a good follow-up to the question you had. So I think the big missing piece here is basically that Google Assistant doesn't have like an action that allows you to like say, hey, tell the Google Assistant to say this. What they can do is basically respond to an action that they run. And so I think there might be some hacky ways to do that. But one of the things, we're in a fairly close contact with the Google Assistant folks. And it's one of the things that we've recommended that they build to really kind of improve and open up a whole slew of new use cases. You can imagine with a Google Assistant action, pretty much anything you could get a notification of. Somebody rings your doorbell, somebody breaks into your home or something like that. You can get some type of alert through Google Assistant. So they're just, kind of infinite use cases that open up if that's possible, but we've got to work with them to make that possible. Manfred is asking, will IFT be available in more languages? Yes. So we have really drug our feet over the years in terms of full localization. And it's one of those things where I'm not quite ready to say that's a mistake yet, but it's, I think maybe once we finally do localize fully, we'll probably be kicking ourselves for doing it so late. The reason that we've really waited for a long time to localize is there is quite a bit of overhead in terms of localization, in terms of launching any new feature. And what we wanted to do was be able to remain much more flexible and kind of agile, to build new things, to change direction one way or another, because we felt like we weren't quite in the right spot to solve this bigger problem of compatibility on the internet. And I think we're much closer to that. In fact, we've actually localized a number of the flows and things that users see if they're turning on an applet or an integration from within one of the services applications. So a service that brings that integration into their own experience. We do localize those interfaces and the different things that IFT does in that regard. But we haven't brought that to the rest of our interfaces and all our mobile apps and websites. And it's one of the things that's very top of mind for us. So no, it's coming. No, we've waited probably too long, hopefully for good reason though. And we want to get there really, really quickly. And it's one of the things where I'm also very, very grateful and would have never guessed this 10 years ago when we launched, but pretty much within that first year, the majority of our audience is outside the US. We're now roughly about 40% of the end users on IFT are here in the US. And I think that's probably typical of a lot of different consumer internet services. But the fact that folks from other countries who speak different languages, who may or may not even, think of English as a second language, are still able to use our product is something I'm really grateful for. And I'm also grateful that they've been patient with us for not localizing yet. And it's something that we hope to do soon. Voldemir is asking, congratulations on the 10th anniversary. Thank you. Could you please highlight top features that make IFT stand out from other home automation solutions, e.g. smart hubs? I could probably go through kind of an exhaustive list. I think the biggest difference in my mind is that, IFT has never really billed itself as a smart home automation solution. Even though we do a lot of stuff with the smart home, roughly a quarter of the services on IFT are smart home services. Might be a little bit more now, kind of depending on your definition of smart home service. But I think that is also the big difference. Because we're not smart home specific, we help folks integrate their smart home products with an array of services that aren't necessarily or aren't at all associated with the smart home. So integrating your Google Calendar or your Todoist task list or your energy bill. Those are things on IFT that aren't smart home services that can benefit from connecting to smart home services. And so that's really the big difference, because we're not like a physical device. We're not a hub in the home. And we really think of our kind of mandate and mission as being much broader than the smart home. The smart home is an incredibly important part of this idea that everything is going to become an internet service. But, the home is only, one aspect of everybody's lives, their work, their personal life, all the services that aren't necessarily associated with a physical product or device. There's still really good reasons for compatibility and integrations to be possible across those boundaries. And that's really, I think, the biggest thing that differentiates IFT from any of the different smart home hubs. In fact, we work with a lot of smart home hubs, so I wouldn't even necessarily say we're competitive in that way. I think there's ways in which it all works better together versus you have to choose one or the other. Rajamaran.com is asking your third arrow for the day. Oh, yeah, well, kind of like a question, but maybe more painful. I dig it. Can IFT develop a PDF introduction for our friends who want to connect to the system? Even a PowerPoint would be a great start. And so if you're referring to the services or the developers, we have docs. We're actually in the process of doing an update to those docs today. I think the easiest way is to just kind of point folks to those docs. We've got some getting started stuff, and we can also share some different code that's been open sourced that folks have used to really kind of what they call shim or kind of proxy an existing API to plug it into IFT. And we're actually also working on some even easier ways to make that integration possible through things like Swagger and other kind of technologies or protocols where the developer has to do even less work to be compatible. So first, maybe actually hit me up on Twitter at ltibitz.com, and I'll send you some of those links I mentioned. But hopefully there's enough there for folks to get started. And you can always convert it into a PDF if that's easier to send to somebody. Startup Santa Ana. Cool name. You're a social startup in spiritual value-added domain for social good. Anything we can get in terms of benefit for corporate social responsibility? Good question. We don't have a whole lot of those kind of promotions on the services side. That said, to get your service on IFT, it's a flat, non-usage based $199 a year. And in fact, we're even thinking about, is that even the right, kind of price point there? Because the reason we're charging developers today, at least in that developer tier, is just to make sure that those developers are serious, that they're not going to build something that's either spammy or violates trust or uses information in the wrong way. It's kind of, if you're familiar with the Apple developer fee, it's, I think, one of the things that Apple did get right, and there's some things they got wrong, of course, too. But that small barrier actually does a whole lot of good in terms of keeping the ecosystem in a really kind of high quality place, because any of the applets, any of the things that users are creating on IFT are really only as good as the underlying services that they're connecting. And if those services either don't work or aren't reliable or are doing something that's a little mischievous, then that's not good for you, the user, and it's also not good for IFT. So that's one of the reasons we've decided to do that, and are open to suggestions on how to make that even easier to approach, especially for folks like yourself that seem to have a really legit use case and just want to be a part of the platform. So Luke Morrison is asking, any update on a battery recipe Yes, and thank you. I think if I'm recalling correctly, you gave me some more info and putting me some docs. It is on our list of things to build. Right now, we've been really focused on things like bugs, problems. I mentioned at the top of the hour, getting more information in our activity feeds for applets to help users kind of debug their own creations, especially pro users who are creating kind of more complex applets with queries or filter, multiple actions. There was a lot of information there that our community support team and internally we had access to, and that's what we would consult when we try to help people solve problems. And we're really just trying to get a lot of that information out there for end users to be able to kind of to help themselves a little bit. And so that's something that we've done just recently. I think I heard it just launched either today or yesterday. So check that out, and there's more coming there. So we're really kind of starting there with things like that, and some of the net new, new services like the percentage battery are a little bit behind that. We felt it was more important to make sure we take what we have and make it work really well, and make sure there's not any issues or there's no real big problems before we start to add more stuff on top. But hopefully early next year, those are things that we can get to, because I totally see how those types of triggers, especially both on Android and iOS, would be really well received, and people could build some pretty cool stuff with them. Manfred Whitman saying, yeah, more languages will help. You're a German company. Hear you loud and clear. Heard from a couple of folks actually this week, just an email about when localization was coming as well. So it is definitely top of mind for us here at IFT. That said, one of the things you can do if you are publishing your own applets, or even the service that you're publishing, you should still be able to put in I think just about any language. So if you want to use German for the title of the applet, or even in the description of the service, if your audience is only German speaking, then that's something you can do as kind of a workaround. So all the content that you create and then kind of publish on IFT for users to see can be localized. Largely, when we talk about localization, it's a bigger problem just around kind of the core interface, the things that users see that the services and developers can't necessarily change because it's kind of embedded into how IFT works. Rajamran.com. All right. Tell us about how you got this idea for starting something like IFT. What was it that you went through in the 10 years? Oh, multi-part question and a long one. So I'll try to keep it short in case there's other kind of follow-up questions on it. So the origin story has a lot of different aspects to it. And now kind of 10 years on, it all kind of blurs a little bit. There's a couple of different things. I think at the time I was working as an engineer at a design firm. And I also had a really kind of strong desire to either learn more about design or even become a designer. And a lot of the work I was doing at the time wasn't necessarily building some big new thing as much as connecting the dots between all the different services that firm was using internally. And it just kind of dawned on me that, maybe this was even the future of programming. Wasn't necessarily, building things from scratch. And for folks out there that are, experienced programmers, you're probably nodding your head or rolling your eyes because you've known this for a long time. But, in the world of programming, nobody is building things at, the binary level on up. Everything that gets built in the world of programming really kind of stands on the shoulders of giants. There's almost infinite layers of things that have been built in the past that enables a programmer to build something new on top. And what's happened now is that something new is often a combination of integrations across, tens, and in some cases even hundreds of different types of services. And that type of thinking and that type of problem, I think I just had this, almost inspirational moment, if you will. And then I think the blog post said I was standing in line for Indian food. So I remember that very clearly, and was also about to go to a concert. And I remember who it was a fellow named Dan Deacon. So kind of a bit of a spiritual experience type concert. And it just dawned on me that this was a problem that actually extended out beyond the world of programming. And it was something that everybody in the world was going to experience, especially as they surrounded themselves with more and more internet services. And that, I think it was unreasonable to expect everybody to become a programmer. It was clear that people were going to be more technical over time. Imagine for those that have kids, and I've got a young daughter, she's only about a year and a half old, kind of a story that everybody hears is that, like, wow, you give them the phone and they know how to use it. And then pretty soon they're more proficient at all those things than you are. Classic coming of age, adult stories, learning that your kids are better with tech than you are. But that's going to happen to everybody, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to be a programmer. And so we really needed ways to enable the general population to do some of this work that was really kind of isolated. If you think of programmers as really kind of like the folks that are literate in our time, and the printing press hasn't been invented. That's a big problem. There's haves and have-nots. And so what we want to do in a way is kind of invent the printing press for integrations, make it something that can be very easily distributed, or maybe even better than the printing press, invent blogging, invent the ability for everybody to have a voice and have a say in how their services integrate. And that was really the core of the problem and the inspiration. And I think the next day I bought If This and That, the domain name, a couple others, and off to the races. The name kind of what came with the idea. And it's actually really worked out well for us over the years. So it's a moment of inspiration that then really kind of dictated the next decade or more of my life in the most positive way. So true inspiration does strike. Luke says, sound great. Okay, yep. Thanks for the updates. And hopefully you'll hear from us as we make some of those new battery triggers and queries available. Anybody have more questions? I think we're almost about halfway through. If we're out of questions, that's just fine. We'll end it early, but happy to answer any questions folks might have, and have really enjoyed the conversation so far. Well, cool. I think we'll end early then. I appreciate the questions that people have. Thank you all for tuning in, and for those that have either signed up on launch day 10 plus years ago now, or signed up yesterday. Thank you so much for working with us, being patient, sending in feedback, and really helping us make IF something that's really, really special. We do have a new question. Startup Santa Ana. As a developer, can we orchestrate integrating Raspberry Pi with any other voice-based service providers? So Raspberry Pi is one of those things where, depending on what you mean, my understanding is Raspberry Pi is much more about kind of an open source hardware spec and hardware plus software spec. So I think the real challenge is getting that Raspberry Pi connected to the internet so that it can work with IFT, whether it's with a voice assistant or not. So if you can do that, or if there's some service that uses Raspberry Pi as a way to kind of actuate things in the physical world, then you can definitely connect that to IFT. And one of the things we have available are the voice assistants, Alexa, Google Assistant, and a slew of others as well. Let's see. Oh, a couple more questions coming in. Oh, good. Chuck Ward, you're looking to chat. Yeah, ping me on Twitter. Happy to chat anytime, or slide into my DMs. We can find a time to chat. Stu Chow, you've got an issue. Not sure what it is. Give me some more information, and happy to take a stab at it. Stuart is asking, care to share the other domain names? So yeah, so If This and That, I think we bought a couple different combos of like if, then, and that, or things like that. We also knew right from the get-go that we wanted to shorten if this and that to IFTTT or IFT. And so we obviously we bought IFTTT. Lucky enough, no one was crazy enough to have that name or any name with 3 T's at the time like that. So that one was easy. I think we bought 4 or 5 T's. We bought IFTT, and I don't think we could have afforded IFT because that was International Freight and Trucking. And I think at the time I checked, they were a multi-billion-dollar international company. So they got to keep IFT.com. But turns out we didn't really need it. So it was okay. I think about a year in, we actually bought one of the shortened domains. I think it's Trinidad and Tobago, IFT.TT. And so that was another one of the important domains that we bought. But, domains are weird. It was 10 years ago. It's one of the things that kind of dates the company a little bit. I think domains were much more important for the success of a startup back then. And you really wanted to make sure you kind of had all the different combinations and you had the actual .com. And I think recently it's become a little less important. My guess is everybody still tries to get the .com as they get more successful, but you see a whole lot of companies starting off with almost a full sentence in their domain name and then something other than .com as the actual domain, I guess, suffix, if you will. It's been quite a journey to see that those things change. I don't think we bought a new domain name for 5-6 years now. So we pretty much stuck with the ones we had and used different subdomains since then. Alvin Foley is asking, Octopus Agile Plunge pricing. I'm not familiar with that, so hopefully I don't need to know what that is. Should I be using 2 applets to switch Smart Life sockets on and off, or be using 1 applet to do on and off as selectable price changes uses less data processing time? Interesting. For at least speaking from an IFT point of view, the data processing time shouldn't really be an issue. We run millions and millions of applets, I think every hour. So I think 1 applet or 2 applets, it should still work within the same amount of time from an end user experience point of view. So much of your experience of any delays between when a trigger happens and when an action is run are largely based on delays that the services themselves introduce. And I'm not pointing the finger here because there's a lot of services that have incredibly fast response times. But there's, I think in terms of services, especially some of the older services that IFT originally built, things like Twitter and others, there's still kind of a pull-based mechanism that adds minutes there. But in terms of by the time IFT actually gets the information, from the trigger, it's really, hundreds of milliseconds in terms of the actual processing time. So hopefully that answers your question, Alvin. Rajamaran.com, can you spare some time for an online broadcast conversation for potential users in Pakistan? Would love to learn more. I'm always happy, especially to help other, kind of aspiring entrepreneurs. So again, maybe hit me up on Twitter and let's get some more information about that, but definitely open to learning more. Patrick DRD, you'd like details when RSS feed is failing on activity log. It still says details not available. Yes, so that's really one of the next steps for the activity logs. So right now we at least shared all of the info in terms of what the applet was trying to do at the time it was doing it or failing, in this case, to do it. The next step for us is to share more about the specific error. And one of the challenges there is as an applet runs, sometimes errors are generated internally, and there's a whole bunch of information that actually exposes kind of how the code works underneath it, rather than like the response or the error code coming back, like in this case from the RSS feed. And so one of the things we've got to do is kind of pull apart the things that are, kind of not necessarily secret, but that are very specific to how the code works at IFT from what the actual problem was with the trigger. And once we do that, well, we want to get that information in there so you can at least kind of get a sense of what's happening. The most common RSS feed problem that we see are timeouts. And largely because RSS feeds because I think they're wonderful. It's kind of a shame that they've gone the way of the dodo a little bit, or at least they're not kind of the hot new thing, but they can be hosted anywhere. And so depending on where you're getting that RSS feed from, it could be somebody's personal server in a basement, it could be on AWS, it could be from New York Times. But because there's a huge spectrum of different places that can host an RSS feed, there's a huge spectrum of performance. And so a lot of the smaller folks that are hosting RSS feeds, things time out, takes 10, 20 seconds for us to try to get the feed info. And that's usually the most common problem. I think it's about 80 to 90% of the errors that you see with RSS feeds are related to timeouts. Startup Santa Ana, while integrating Raspberry Pi with Alexa in your place on premise, what services from IFT can we make use of? So I would say if you're trying to integrate Raspberry Pi with something like Alexa on premise, and especially it sounds like it's with Raspberry Pi, there's some hardware use case. I would actually argue against perhaps what IFT can provide in that situation, depending on your use case, of course. But because it's on-prem, because I think Alexa and Google Assistant have different protocols to communicate with devices on a local area network. Now, whether that's Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, or I'm not quite sure on the different things or different options that they have. I would recommend that might be the easiest place for you to start if it's just a personal project. Now, that said, if it's just as easy to connect that Raspberry Pi to the internet somewhere, and from there have an internet service that IFT can communicate with, there are some things that we can do. So, for instance, you could sign up and you can build a service on IFT for free. You don't have to become a developer or a true developer plan to build a service that you use personally. That's one of those little known features or facts that we also don't do a good job of communicating yet, and we've got to fix. But you can build your own service around your own Raspberry Pi. You probably don't want to let other people use that, so you never need to publish or actually get your own developer account there. And that might be a way to then kind of build triggers, queries, and actions around that Raspberry Pi, and then from there connect it to Alexa or any other service that you might want. So try that out, or at least look for more info, and hit me up on Twitter if you need some help, because we don't make that super clear. And I'm at LTibits on Twitter. Dr. Alan Weinstein signed up to your platform to help with your smart home, and you're basically a newbie. Cool. We're all newbies at everything, at least at some time. Is there someone you can contact to ask questions about my unique setups used in my home with Siri? So the first thing I'll say is, while there are some ways to use Siri and IFT, we don't natively support it. There's not a Siri service on IFT yet. And that's largely, again, because Apple has chosen to make Siri, I think, very isolated and very kind of device specific versus cloud or internet specific. And so there are some workarounds. I would actually just do a Google search, Siri IFT, see all kinds of different hacks that people have come up, and some of those work quite well. But start there. And then, from there, you can always ping me on Twitter. And if you upgrade to Pro, you should get a response back from our community support team, who's really, those folks are the experts, both for issues and suggestions. And you should get that response back, 24 to 48 hours later, and hopefully with some good details on how you can actually leverage it. Welcome, and thanks for signing up. You're 10 years into something that we've been hopefully making better every year until now, and glad to have you on board. So Albin is saying, should one applet switch on and off with its programming as best practice? Yes, sometimes 2 or 3 minutes delay. I would say yes. Well, so much of how applets are created is really dictated by what triggers, queries, and actions are available. So it really depends on the service you're trying to switch on and off. If they have a singular action that you can both switch on and switch off, that would be the ideal kind of best practice. If they have an action that is switch on and another action that is switch off, there's nothing wrong with that. That's how they've kind of chosen to represent their API and their service. In that case, I would say it's really up to you in terms of what you think is easier to manage. What we want to do at IFT is actually make it easier for you to manage something like that in one applet. That way you're not thinking about this solution to your problem in terms of multiple different little applets, and you somehow have to kind of think about those two things at the same time. I'd hope that every applet over time, as we continue to add features and services, continue to build new and kind of differentiated triggers, queries, and actions, that we can help folks really kind of solve each specific problem with one specific applet. So maybe I'm answering my question there that yes, best practices is to do it in one applet, but that isn't always the easiest or even possible route to go, depending on what's available based on the services you're using. Let's see. Yeah, Stuart, you're asking, nice to see a short prezo on your infrastructure design. Yeah, in fact, I'd love to find a way to get some of our engineers in front of folks to share more about what they're doing. I think they've just done such an amazing job over the years with a very small team and a very large problem and large audience. So much of the work we do is actually background work. You know, as a user of IFT, you really only think of the things you can see. But you know, it's in a way, it's an iceberg where 90% of the work and 90% of what IFT does, no one actually sees because it happens when you're not actually looking at the product. It's kind of happening in the background, and that's where so much of the kind of innovation and new ideas, both in terms of the infrastructure and the code we're writing, really shine. So we'll figure out ways to do that next year. Ryder is asking, did you fix the issue with the iPad app? Boom, Ryder, thank you so much. In fact, we did fix it. I don't think we've gone through the Apple review process yet, but you know, I think we do test some things on iPad. We found that it was like, if you do this a couple times, the thing keeps growing. In fact, maybe you actually told us specifically that, but you know, we were able to validate that really quick. It is fixed. It's not yet released, but it should be there shortly. Thank you so much, and keep those things coming. That was kind of embarrassing, but hopefully it's all fixed now. Dr. Alan Weinstein, yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Glad you dig pro, and always open for feedback and suggestions. We've still got a whole lot of work to do there, and some hopefully exciting things early next year in terms of the things that pros have been asking for, and that's exactly why we did it. We want to reinvest in users with the things that they want, and do that in a way that's sustainable and hopefully creates more and more value and more trust with IFT over time. Oh, Peter's reminding us we've got 15 minutes remaining. Thanks. We almost finished it halfway through, so glad people had more questions here. Rajamaran.com, share a few tips for startups from your experience with bringing IFT to this level, and do mention some challenges you face along the way. Sure. So many tips. I think one of the ones that I've come back to and have shared with other entrepreneurs that I met with over the years, it's a little counterintuitive. So when you do a startup, especially for the first time, there's so much you don't know. So even the fact that you're doing a startup, you probably already have a mindset of being willing to kind of put yourself in uncomfortable positions, really kind of learn by doing, learn by making mistakes. That's kind of all part of the territory. I think one of the biggest challenges is, especially for first-time entrepreneurs, is they'll find a group of pretty good advisors, either folks that have done it before, it might be their investors, might be friends, and sometimes it feels almost like a shortcut to think of these folks that have done it before, especially the ones that have been really successful in doing it before, and kind of take their advice as gospel. And so I think that's one of the things is, yes, you should be soliciting advice and trying to learn from as many people that have been there and done that as possible. But there is no one size fits all advice. There's always a situation in which someone's good advice is actually really bad advice. And that can be maddening at times, because sometimes you just don't want to have to treat everything as a reinvention of the wheel. But I think it's one of the things that you have to get really, really comfortable with. This weird, kind of almost counterintuitive, trying to seek advice from smart people, but taking each piece of that advice not necessarily at face value, and really being willing to question some of that advice to fit it into your own experience and then make your own decision. And hopefully that doesn't sound cliche, but it's one of the hardest things I think to learn is that you want more advice, but almost all advice is perhaps bad. You've got to kind of take the good with the bad and really make your own decision. And it's a huge challenge. And it's one of the things where I think a lot of the mistakes we've made over the years, again, not to blame it on people's bad advice. Again, we've made all the decisions and we've got all the responsibility and the accountability for everything we've done well and poorly. But sometimes, the mistakes are largely based on situations where I or our team had a really strong gut feeling and intuition. And that's, I think that's one of those aspects of being an entrepreneur that's really hard to kind of talk about, really hard to kind of learn that skill. But when that intuition met advice or kind of counter advice in the other direction from people that were really, really smart, that had done it all before, that, were basically saying that's crazy, or you shouldn't do that, or you should do this instead. It's often those situations where it felt so safe to make a decision that somebody that was really, really smart and experienced advocated for, that then in retrospect, you look back and said, oh, wow, this person that I talked to for 30 minutes, yes, they're really, really smart, but they didn't have any of the context or even a fraction of the context that we did. And had we followed that intuition at the time, we probably would have come out in a better spot. So we can talk about different situations where that applies, but it's one of those things where so much of the learning process, I think, is something that happens by experience, and you've got to kind of make those mistakes a few times through and hope that none of those mistakes really kill you. They make you stronger. And the other thing is, we've made so many mistakes and we're still here 10 years later, that we're almost kind of a living, breathing example that, most mistakes don't kill you or don't kill your startup. But a lot of them sure feel like they could. So, it's always good to avoid unnecessary risk, but also the worst case scenario very rarely happens when you make those mistakes. Tell us about your team's efforts in developing IFT. So I'd love to go into more detail there. I know that there's a whole thing to unpack, and it might even be more fun to get some other folks on the team kind of speaking on what they're working on, whether it's infrastructure or otherwise. So that might be something we tackle in a future session. That's a great question. Are we sending IFT Pro user stickers? Good idea. I think maybe we should, or at least we should figure out some ways to make that available. It would be difficult to send out 200,000 stickers across the globe, managing everybody's address, but maybe there's some other way that we can make those available for folks. We've got them. We've got T-shirts and other things as well. So we'll figure out how to make those accessible next year somehow. Startup Santa Ana is asking, please have some kind of sandbox environment so developers can try out without a subscription. And that's one of the things that I think regrettably we haven't done a good job of making clear. You can try out pretty much, in fact, everything without paying IFT a penny on the developer side. So just head over to the platform. You can begin building a service, testing it. The only time that we really kind of force a paywall is when you go to try to publish that service. And the same goes for things like applets and connections when you try to publish applets and connections, but you can still build them, turn them on yourself, pretty much do everything that you can do. You just can't get a lot of other users to do that without also becoming a customer. So we'll do a better job of making that clear. And if you need help finding kind of the specific link, ping me on Twitter and I'll make sure that's available. Michael, thank you. Really, really, really stoked to make it 10 years. And in all honesty, have been just as excited throughout, even though, man, startups are really, really hard. But at the same time, it's like to get to work on something that you are really, really passionate about, and to get to learn from all of your own mistakes in a way that, every one of those mistakes I've made, I'm actually grateful for because that's one of the values here at IFT is always learning. And so, in retrospect, even the mistakes are things that I kind of remember fondly, and I expect to make more mistakes in the future. So hopefully fewer and fewer over time, and hopefully never the same one twice. But it's just part of the process, and I love it. High resolution graphics, Luke, genius. Yeah, we should just get some SVGs out there for folks to make their own stickers. That's a great idea. RajamRan.com, appreciate your time as well. Great listening and great chatting with you. Keep the questions coming. And Startup Santa Ana come out with step-by-step videos. We have those for end users and pros. Yes, we need those for developers. Peter Curley is our VP of Marketing, who's here working with us in the chat. So I bet he heard that loud and clear. He's taking notes. Michael Harris, you may not have signed up since day one. 2013 is almost day one. So, not that it's a competition, but that's pretty cool. Thank you. You're in heaven with Pro. Yeah, awesome. Folders in the future. Yes. Better ways to manage applets are coming. One of the things I said at the top of the hour is so much of our team's time has really been focused on fixing bugs or problems with the things that we currently have, the features we currently have. So for instance, the things like folders or tags to manage, a long list of applets is top of mind. One of the things we fixed first is that for users that had like hundreds and hundreds of applets, both in the archive and kind of live and running, there was a number of situations where our interface actually timed out. So we were working to fix those types of problems. Luckily, it didn't happen to me. I think I've got about 300 applets, but there were some others with 200 or 300 applets where they were seeing that problem kind of intermittently. So that's something I know we fixed just here in the last week or so. So as we clear all those type of issues, we're then going to move on to some of those net new features and issues that are kind of more about helping people manage that high number of applets. But first, we've got to make sure everybody with a number of applets like that can just see them. And so those are the things we prioritize first. Yeah. All righty. I think we're right at the end of the hour. Peter says one last question, please. Oh, awesome. Startup Santa Ana says you were introduced to IFT by Jeff Blankenberg, Amazon Alexa evangelist. Cool. If maybe send me a pointer to that or a link if he's got anything publicly available. Would love to see what their Alexa evangelists are saying about IFT. That's cool. Oh, Michael, you've already got the same actions, multi-same actions. Yes, I think that is on iOS. It may actually have some problems if you then build one on iOS and go to the web. But my sense is that all of that's coming very soon in a matter of days. That was another one of those, really almost more like bugs that we fixed, but really excited to have that out there. We were actually knew that was an issue going into it, but we're pretty surprised by just how many people had that feedback. They want to use the same action more than once, and that's cool. We now support it, or at least in a matter of days, support it across all the platforms. Okay. Well, thank you all for tuning in. We'll do this again next month. And in the meantime, if you have questions, feedback, comments, anything, hit me up on Twitter. I try to respond to everybody that does. I'm at LTibbets on Twitter. And have a great Thursday or Friday if you're in a different time zone. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.